Cancon exceeded our wildest expectations and was an amazing start to Shatterpoint in the year of 2024. In this episode, Cameron and I will be interviewing the Cancon winner, Luke Thompson, who's going to explain how he prepped and practiced to take out the pole position in Australia's first ever official Star Wars Shatterpoint premiere event. Following that, Cameron and I are going to discuss what we think the impact of Darth Vader, the Emperor's Servant, and Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker will be on the Shatterpoint meta, and what roles they might fill on the battlefield and within our strike team building. Then, I'll also advertise some upcoming events in the Australian and international circuits that our audience can hopefully participate in. My name is Tom Harper. All of the music used in our content is, of course, composed by the transcendent Gabriel Fisher. Links to where you can check out and follow his projects are in the episode's show notes, along with timestamps for this episode's segments and all of the places you can check out and support our content. If you love what you hear, please consider joining our Patreon. A massive thank you goes to Kevin C, Cyram, Arfsarfs, Winter AU, Soup, Alan Jones, Death 1942, Bruno and Duralvar for being paid members. It means an incredible amount and we cannot wait to bring you more content. Now, join me as we continue our exciting journey into the domain of Star Wars Shatterpoint.
You don't know the power of the...
All right, shut up.
Of the dark.
Oh, yeah.
Who's the more foolish, the fool or the fool of politics?
It's a trap!
Kid, I flew from one side of this galaxy to the other and seen a lot of strange stuff, but I've never seen...
G'day everyone, you are listening to the Space Slugs. Today, we are joined by a very special guest, the Cancon winner, Luke Thompson. Luke, of course, a massive congrats for winning the largest and the first ever real-life premiere event of Shatterpoint here in Australia. And thank you so much for joining us here on the cast.
No, my absolute pleasure. I've been a fan of you guys from the start, so excited to be on.
There's a very long history to be a fan of from the start as well, so that that means a lot. Thank you. And of course, we've got the top slug, the big slug, the behind-the-scenes slug, Cam, joining us here as well. Thank you, Cam.
No, I'm happy to be here. It's contractual obligation. I don't know if I can be top slug much longer. I think you did quite well, Tom, at CanCon, but I'm sure we'll get into that maybe. Brief moment.
Absolutely. So look, as we said in the introduction, this is basically celebrating all things CanCon, but specifically focusing on, I guess, Luke, your journey to CanCon, if that works for you, and just walking us through sort of how you prepared, what you took, how your games went, and basically all things CanCon. So, yeah, I guess if we wanted to start, Luke, what did your CanCon prep look like? I mean, how did you go about getting ready, repping, preparing for this awesome event?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess in terms of prep, I think I worked out about 4 months out that I was going to go. And so that meant there was sort of two pressures there. One is, obviously picking the best list, but honestly, the maybe bigger one was making sure I actually had time to paint everything. And what that really led me to in the first instance was I'd basically only painted Republic at that stage. So I knew that at least one of my squads was going to be Republic. I also think that... really, Republic can't support a full Premiere squad at the moment. So I knew the other half would be something Separatist related or, Dathomirian or any of the other sort of bad guy side of things. So where I originally started, my original concept was, okay, I have Anakin going and I haven't had much of a go with him. So let's start with Anakin and Arfs and Rex. And then I thought Padme might be an interesting combo over that, so the Padme box. That was where I started. The other half that I was thinking was going to be Maul and Talzin. That was one that I'd played a little bit at a few local tournaments I really liked. So that was the full Talzin box, and then Maul and Super Commandos and Jango. So I quite liked that. The only thing that tripped me up a little bit was it was a bit hard work managing Force, particularly every time Mother activated, she wanted to do the manipulating hand was sort of the thing that generally drained it. So that was where I started. I had a few goes of that Anakin Padme list, and it felt all right. I won a few games, lost a few, felt okay, but wasn't quite landing with my style. So the actual catalyst that basically formed all of my CanCon list was the first round of the TTS Season 2. where I played Wargaming Dad, who, if any of you guys have played, is very, very good. And he played what was eventually became one side of my Cancon list, which was Dooku plus Talzin, just Dooku box, Talzin box, into that Anakin list I mentioned, and he absolutely wrecked me. It wasn't even close. And so that both prompted me to think, okay, maybe this Anakin Padme list isn't for me. And also, geez, this list seems interesting. I might give that a go. So I ran that through the rest of the TTS league into the not quite top bracket cut with Tom, the one that Tom ultimately won. And that got me through a round of that until I ran into Tom and got wrecked by him. It's the thing that I'm sure anyone who's played him is familiar with. But yeah, so that was how it sort of solidified this is going to be my main list. My sort of really what appealed to me is it's a combination of, it's a pretty decent all-comers list, Dooku Talzin, because it has a lot of out-of-activation movement, some very solid figures, some good diceless displacement. Almost everything has a very strong attack, or at least a good attack in terms of displacement and conditions. And then I thought, okay, well, if that's going to be my main squad, then I need to work out what I'm going to bring that sort of addresses the things that squad's not great at. And so what that squad's not great at is, it's not a hyper-aggressive list. It doesn't wound things particularly well. And that means it's not great into things like OB Republic or OB Mace Republic, because if you're not consistently taking out supports in one hit, then that list tends to just, stay on points and heal, and you just never get anywhere, which was my exact experience against Tom into his OB Anakin list. And so that other strike team ended up being Mace. So Mace with the usual ARFs and Pons, and then sort of the classic Obi-Wan squad, which is Obi, Rex, and Commandos. And I think that plays really well into both of those squads I was really worried about. So in terms of a mirror into Republic, I think that just the level of defense you have there makes it really hard for Republic, who don't have diceless displacement, to move you off points. And if the mace bubbles up, even to do much damage. So I think in terms of the mirror, that was quite a strong option. And then into your droid swarm, yes, they have really good movement. The other thing they rely on is a lot of chip damage. And when everything has protection and steadfast, that chip damage often does nothing. Like even Magna Guard, those 5 dice attacks often just bounce off. Just because if you just end up with the one crit, they do literally nothing, which is the thing that Magna Guards very rarely have the experience of doing. Once I sort of worked out that was what I was going with, I was very comfortable with that as a squad build, because effectively that's sort of two, rather than I sort of described that Dooku Talzin box as an all-comers, but really what it is the two sort of heavy skew lists. Is you've got your Dooku Talzin, which is very, very, very good into hyper-aggression, because you just get those double revenge triggers, and often, I've had a game once with them where I lost Savage to a not-so-fast, and I still managed to flip a point just because I had 2 revenge triggers to do things. So cool. It was a better activation than if they'd let Savage activate. So stuff like that. It's if you're getting wounded, it's amazing. Mainly it's a skew of, I think there's going to be a lot of Vader. Here's what I'm going to serve up to that. And then if I'm seeing the things I'm scared of, I'll take the OB Mace list, which is solid in its own right. And then from there, in terms of prep, once I'd settled on that, it was really just bringing that one or both of those lists to any game night, any weekend tournament, and just getting as many reps in as I could. That was my CanCon prep.
Awesome. Okay, well, I mean, it definitely paid off, because you did win, so massive congratulations for that. Cameron, did you want to add anything?
No, I think the thing that really I think is really exciting from a macro perspective on the game, 3 of your squads are just out of the box, which I think shows just how well so far AMG is really doing at the balance and I guess in a lot of ways the onboarding, where you can just grab a box off the shelf. You don't really have to think about it too hard. Grab a box, it's going to work together and it's going to be competitive, and I think that's really, really exciting from a player standpoint, because it means that you don't have to go online, troll through the Discords and the subreddits and the Facebooks and try and find the special combo pieces. You really can just grab boxes off the shelf, take them to a tournament and do well. The game is a really healthy state where it's not a combo piece game. It really is, the things you pull off the shelf will work really well together. And if you play them well, you can take them to, top tables. So I think that shows, one, your skill, Luke, in being able to really find the power of these squad boxes as they are, and it says a lot about the game. So I just wanted to run away with that because I think that's quite exciting.
Yeah, awesome. And so, look, Luke, that was a great breakdown in terms of how you prepared. And I did want to touch on a few things before we go into what your pre-game analysis looked like actually at the con. And the main one that I wanted to touch on there is, you did mention that GAR or Galactic Republic, you don't think that they can necessarily support a full Premier strike team at this stage. I think I tend to agree with you, but I'd love to hear your thoughts and, just why you've arrived at that sentiment.
Yeah, so look, there's two things, and I think the first one's smaller than the second one, but they're both relevant. So the first one is up until Plo comes out in a couple of weeks, there's no diceless displacement, which just makes them a bit scary into things like if you're playing into lists with a lot of steadfast, that you have to have either move lots of units in up or successfully attack to move things on. That's a little scary. You don't have as much swing opportunity as other lists, like you don't have a maul that can just come and say, okay, this point with two people on it, that's mine. You have almost nothing you can do about it. But I think the bigger one is actually just that because of sort of, I think, a range of factors, but especially the how squishy the supports are, they're just not good into those sort of hyper aggressive, Vader plus Grievous and all of the and then whatever they put underneath it. Because if you just fall behind on the wound race, and you by the end of the first struggle, half your stuff's wounded, and then that makes the second struggle harder, and all of a sudden it's over. I think you can definitely win those matches, but they're real uphill battles, and there's just a lot of that around at the moment. I think once Plo comes out, I think you possibly are drifting into maybe being able to play into that. I think Plo and that box certainly Plo and Padawan Ahsoka are both very good pieces and bring a different play style. And I suspect having Wolfpack as another 8 health support may well help as well, even though we haven't seen the full cards. But yeah, right at the minute, I didn't think there was 4 really compelling squads that do different things.
I guess the only comment there would be that Barriss, of course, offers you some form of diceless displacement. But I'm not sure if you agree with the sentiment but Barriss is quite fragile in my mind. And in a heavy sort of melee orientated, I don't want to call it a meta because things shift all the time, but in the situation that we are now, where we have some really good heavy damage in melee characters such as Vader and Grievous and even Maul to an extent, I do find that once she gets wounded, she loses a lot of that efficiency, but that's just personal taste. A lot of people are playing Barriss beautifully, and I just think that's worth mentioning. So you've done all this prep work for Cancon. You're feeling pretty confident going in. We've got a really great group of Australian players that have made it to this, first Premier event that we've ever run. And props to Michael, who appeared on the last episode, which was really, really exciting. You sit down and you sort of see your first matchup. What are you thinking about? How much of that pre-game analysis are you performing? What's your first steps as you get to the table?
Yeah, fair. Look, I mean, I think really the two things you look at, right, are board and opponent. The list is probably the most important thing because of all of the reasons I talked about why I selected my squads. Is I really don't want to be putting something up that I think is going to get hard counted, or as hard counted as you can in this game. I don't think anything that you put up is a real immediate losing proposition at the moment. But I want to be picking as strong matchups as I can. And then there is an element of looking at the boards, particularly at the moment when the community is still sort of finding our feet in terms of what a good board and a bad board actually looks like, how many ingress points and all sorts of, how many buildings, where they are, how hard everything is to get to or not. So in terms of the board, which is the easiest bit to speak about, the Dooku Talzin list is quite reliant on being able to get, if you pull Dooku or Talzin early, being able to use their abilities to send. So for Talzin, she can double dash Savage, and Dooku bringing a Magna with him. That's all very ground based. So there's no climbs, there's no jumps in that movement. So how hard am I going to find to get particularly those 2 center, right and left objectives? Because they're obviously the ones that matter in Sabotage Showdown, which is generally what you're playing these days and what I brought. So there's a bit of that, but again, it was honestly 80%. And I think in the end, all of my decisions were what my opponent brought and what I did or didn't want to face with either squad.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I think, terrain is obviously a factor, but it sounds like a lot of your prep work was, of course, done in terms of countering or at least having an answer to a particular strike team. So let's say, I don't know, you sit up against, let's just say you have Mandalorians in one of your opponent's strike teams. So let's say it's Maul and maybe Ahsoka, and both of the Mandalorian secondaries and both of the Mandalorian supports. And then you also have, let's say, Grievous and Vader on the other. What's the thing that's running through your head in terms of picking? Are you just going to say, all right, well, they've got those really high damage output primaries, and therefore I'm going to pick not clones, I'm going to pick, Dooku and Talzin? Or is there something further that you're looking at?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think the sort of the broad process is there anything that my opponent has that my squad really, really doesn't want to see? And one of my squads. And so in that case, I hear Vader and Grievous, and I think, okay, Republic absolutely do not want to see that. So it's probably going to be Dooku and Talzin. And then Mandos are an interesting one. I think they're probably one of the most general, middle of the road, a bit good at everything squads that you're going to get in the game at the moment. And so they're probably they're a bit of a, I think either squad I'm not thrilled with playing into, but I'm not sad about either. So in that case, the easy decision is going to be the Talzin and Talzin Dooku box.
Yeah, well, that's probably a too easy a question that I threw you at the very beginning. So I think maybe what the best thing to do now would be going through your matches and seeing how you sort of iterated those decisions on the board, or at least in that pre-game. Cameron, did you have anything to add about that?
No, I think my one question, I guess, and it sounds like you've sort of already answered it, but it's nice to get it explicit, is in your pre-tournament squad building, you essentially decided on, I've got my A team, which sounds like it was Dooku and Talzin, and then you were looking for a B team to sort of help mitigate some of those bad matchups. Have I got that right?
Yeah, pretty much. And look, I will say it very much started that way, that I think I'll just play this Republic once to get it out of the way and not. As I put more practice in, I did gain a bit more respect for where that Obi Mace squad came strong. And I think I ended up a bit more of this is just purely a matchup. I'm going to take one or the other.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, I was just, because I think I'm very interested in, at the moment, figuring out how people are building these Premier strike teams. Just simply on the idea of people going mix and match, which was the route that I ended up going, was mixing and matching 4 different squads. But, I think a lot of the people that did well seem to have gone with the idea of here's my A team and here's my B team. As the game progresses, that might change, but for now it does seem to be favouring the A team, B team. So yeah, I was just curious if that was your thought. Do you think you ever would have swapped primaries around and mix and matched at all? I can't believe that would have ever really presented itself.
Yeah, no, probably not in this combination. And not to dismiss the idea of particularly a shuffle, I can match anyone with everyone. I think that sort of the main two things that stopped me from doing that is I've got a 2-year-old daughter. I don't have a ton of time to put reps into 4 different iterations of squads.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also because one of the squads I'm leaning on, I was definitely going to bring Republic, and I think Republic are there's a few exceptions, but generally speaking, best when it's all Republic. And so those two things sort of push me to the A squad, B squad, or however you want to put it. But yes, no, I think as the game expands, that sort of shuffle to match your matchup is probably going to become a more common approach.
Yeah, cool. That was all I had.
Let's get into your matches. So day 1, round 1, you played against a great gentleman by the name of Jason. He is from New South Wales here in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you actually gave me almost this exact scenario when you reeled off the list before.
Yeah, I just realised that.
Which is all good. So basically, I saw the Mando with so Ahsoka and Lumi with the Mandos, and then he had the Talzin box, and then Maul with Obi-2 and Magna Guards. So again, we're seeing this one was more about, so Obi-2 is the other one that I really don't want to see as Republic, because he just makes a point a bit untouchable for them.
And that's Obi-Wan Jedi out of hiding?
Yes, exactly right. Thank you for the full name. Between that and the fact that I wasn't particularly alarmed by anything he could pull out into the Talzin and Dooku side of things, that was what I went with. So I went with Talzin and Dooku into that one. That was actually a pretty tight game. It was definitely 2 struggles to 1. I feel like I might have even lost the first struggle on this one, but I can't remember exactly. So that was a tight game, but I ended up getting that one.
The one thing that I do, sorry, two things that I want to maybe draw from there is the notion that OB2 or OB Jedi Out of Hiding does make it very difficult for the Republic unless you're bringing Anakin, I think, or some form of diceless displacement from an external party. Anakin can at least double tap the target that he wants to, but characters like Mace or General Obi-Wan Kenobi, I feel like really struggle into Obi-Wan Out of Hiding. So I think that was a really good shout in avoiding that matchup because, as you've said multiple times throughout the episode, at this stage, Gar have no diceless displacement. The other thing that I wanted to, I guess, ask you about was, were you concerned that you might not get a lot of value out of Dooku and Talzin's abilities here in terms of their identities? Because the Mandalorians, I feel like, don't have a huge amount of wounding, especially if they're not bringing Lord Maul. And I note that this was a Luminara and Ahsoka Tano led strike team.
Yeah, look, I think probably the two things are, I think the list is strong enough to at least do well, even if my opponent isn't wounding things consistently. And also, I think Mandos are sort of like they're middle of the road in terms of wounding things, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like they all have strong activations. They're all going to go a few times down their tree every time they attack, just about. The supers and Gar in particular do tend to wound things. And supers in particular are probably not influencing the game much if they're not wounding, because all of their shoves are well down the tree. So I think in that case, I was not expecting to get 8 wounds across my squad or anything crazy like that, but I was expecting enough to make my opponent's life hard when he's pulling out things that want to wound.
Okay, well, congratulations on round one. It did look like a very tight match. So you played, unfortunately, the mission isn't there, but I'm assuming you played on Sabotage Showdown because the Mandalorians love that mission. So that was a 4 wounds each and a 2 struggle victory to yourself, with Jason scoring 1. So good start to the tournament. You always want to win your first round, just to put a little skip in your step. What was round 2?
So that was into Jeff Galea, who is one of the names I saw in the tournament that I wasn't that keen to run into early, but that's all right, because I've seen him do well at TTS leagues. So he was running the Dooku box, another squad that was Maul, OB2, Clan Kreese, and then he had Vader, Barriss, Arfs, and Lumi, Rex, and Super Commandos. So that was an interesting one, because that's very much, I think that was maybe the only sort of obvious mix and match squad I saw in the day. And so that was another one that gave me pause a little bit, but ultimately, again, I'm seeing OB2, I'm seeing Vader, so that's a job for Talzin Dooku. That game I think that was my one game that I won in 2 struggles, which I think I got a bit lucky in a few spots. I think there's just 1 or 2 opportunities I had that Jeff didn't spot until it was too late. I think there was a dash from Savage that got me, just from one of his abilities that got me an unguarded back point that he didn't spot, and a few other things that just sort of let me capture it, even though I think both struggles were tough. I managed to get both of them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example, and I'm not sure, Cameron, if you want to jump in there in terms of that rotation, because it sounded like, maybe if you weren't bringing a straight Dooku Talzin roster that you knew could handle Obi and Vader, Obi to Jedi Out of Hiding and Vader, that might have given a lot of other players pause, I think, because that is what is he actually going to play, especially this early in the event, right?
Yeah, I think it's a good testament there, Luke, to your preparation and your understanding of your squad, its strengths, its weaknesses, which was something Morgan discussed in really good detail last week about identifying strengths and weaknesses in your own squad. You knew, hey, this is not going to be a good matchup. I'm going to stick with what I know is going to match up well against those 2 units specifically that are going to cause me trouble. And I think that's something that people should be taking away here is really, we all want to think that we're the smartest people in the game and we're building the best strike teams every day. But it is really important to identify what weaknesses your full Premier list has and how you can try and mitigate that. So I think that's a really good lesson for people to learn. And obviously that decision and that sort of preparation has set you up for success. So it's a proven track record, which is really nice to see.
Yeah, and so on to round 3. The fatigue is probably starting to set in. the want for maybe a beer or a lunch with a dinner with the guys is starting to kick in. It's a long day. How are you feeling going into your game against Thomas Kildare Wise?
Yeah, so look, that was another one that gave me pause. I think definitely that pressure to pick the second squad was starting to mount a bit. So even before I got to the table, I'm like, okay, I probably should lean towards them if I'm not sure. So what Thomas had in his squad was he had the Mace box, so Padme box, Dooku box, and Asajj Kraken B2s. So again, that was one where it's a little less obvious, but again, I'm looking at the Dooku box plus Asajj Kraken B2s, I think that one in particular has better out of activation movement than mine does. So that sort of pushed me a little bit away from my Dooku Talzin list. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, I quite like the Obi Mace into Republic. So I thought, okay, this is probably the time to bring out Obi Mace, where I don't hate either of the matchups, and one of them I think it's the preferred one. So Thomas ended up playing Mace and Padme into me, so which was fine, and that was another tough 3 struggle one. I think we actually played shifting priorities in that one too, if I remember correctly. So that also made that a little bit of a harder one for me. I'd prefer Sabotage Showdown with the Republic. Unluckily for him, lucky for me, he got his deployment a little off and didn't cap the back objective immediately, and that sort of put him behind in the first struggle. And honestly, I think it was a pretty even exchange, with the exception that I sort of had that little bit ahead of him, and managed to get to just sort of maintain that position and 1 in 3. So that was another good one.
So how did you feel at the end of day 3? I mean, you've played all 4 of your squads, both of your A and B strike teams. Are you feeling pretty good going into day 2?
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't complain. Yeah, it was thrilled to get the 3. Like honestly, I think I would have been disappointed if I didn't get 3 wins for the event. That was sort of my base. So I was happy to have gotten that, and not so I could be only to be so disappointed if I get wrecked the next day.
Yeah.
So that was good. Yes, and then a little sleepy and a little hungry was probably the other main feelings coming out of it.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the best things about going to a convention is obviously meeting people, especially a game that's this young as Shatterpoint. It was really interesting to sort of put a face to all the names that we're seeing online from the Australian community. And we all had a really good night out that night, and shared some stories and built some camaraderie. So that was really fun to see. You cheekily, though, you didn't stay out for too long, and that might have been the recipe for your success. What do you reckon?
Yeah, look, it may have helped. I'm not sure I'd have lasted, to be honest. I was pretty tired, but yes, no, I'm glad I stayed for a couple of beers, but not many. So you certainly looked a little rougher in the morning. So
Yeah, I did play Tom with as much beer as possible. I wanted him to have a good out. If he lost, I wanted him to have a really good excuse, and look how well it's gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because round 4 was actually myself up against you, Luke. So what were you thinking when you saw my strike teams?
Well, I mean, look, I was honestly even more worried seeing your name, because you're the one that I'd played before that you just absolutely wrecked me, and that's been our only game. So you were the one, the name I was eyeing off and being a little scared to match into to begin with. But aside from that, I think this was another one that wasn't too hard a decision for me, because again, so your strike teams, so you have the Obi-Wan and then Anakin is one of your strike teams, which again was that Republic mirror that I don't mind, particularly Obi's hunker shenanigans, great into Anakin.
Oh yeah.
About the only thing that can really turn off is his double tap, or one of the few. And then your other one is so Grievous Kraken B2s and Maul Kalani Magnas, which again is that double tack droid list where you're doing lots of that chip damage, which often that my Republic list can shrug off. So that was another one that I was reasonably confident in picking. And then the last thing of that was our match where you wrecked me was my Talzin and Dooku list into your Obi and Annie one, which you had there. So that made it that really tipped me over the top in terms of which squad to choose.
Yeah, definitely. I do want to just add a few things there. Maybe we had a really good. The last time we played was in the not quite top cut of the previous TTS league, which was called, I believe, Never Tell Me the Odds. And you were playing, your fantastically piloted Dooku and Mother Talzin list. Yep. I do want to say maybe, and I'm not sure if you agree with this sentiment, but I actually think that General Obi-Wan Kenobi, and this is something that I want to touch on at the end, I think General Obi-Wan Kenobi has a really good sort of time into Mother Talzin, because very early on in his tree, he's putting out a disarm, he's putting out an expose, and if he gets deep enough, he's actually putting out a pin as well. And all of those conditions just really make Talzin's life difficult to use a lot of her kit. Do you agree with that assessment?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, there's lots of between that and yeah, the hunker being able to, you take your hunker, you wound the person you want to wound. Talzin tries to push you off the point, and you just come straight back. So there's lots of ways in which I 100% agree that Talzin does not want to see General Obi.
Great, yeah, no, 100%. And I think we'll put a little pin in that, and we'll come back to that General Obi-Wan Kenobi assessment at the end. But yeah, how did you find our match?
Yeah, no, it was good. It was. I mean, it was super tight. It was definitely my tightest game of the whole weekend. It was a really fun match, actually. I have to compliment you. You're a very, very clean, clear player. You're an absolute pleasure to play against. It's
thank you. You too.
Thanks.
Try sleeping in the same room as him. Oh, jeez. It's horrible.
Yeah, I got no experience with that, so I won't comment. Yeah, so look, that one, yeah, it was a very tough game. That was, Tom, you won the first struggle, and I won the next two. It was an hour and a half
struggle one, yeah.
It was a ridiculous struggle one, and it came down in the end because it was just so close. It was just, finally, I whiffed an attack with Pons that stopped me pushing one of your B2s off a point and taking the struggle, and then you just, because all of the momentum had built up, you just immediately took it from there, basically. So that was a very tough fought first struggle, and then I think the second struggle you almost took from me, and then the third one was real up in the air until I got a lucky break, and your B2 failed to get any results anywhere down his tree to push Obi off a point, and that let me take it. So yeah, that was a ridiculously close game. That really could have gone either way. That was a good one.
It was it was one of the best Shatterpoint games I think I've ever played. So thank you very much for that. It was just so much fun, real fun.
Yeah, Tom will never forget it.
No,
I wouldn't shut up about it on the whole drive home. Luke.
That is
seriously.
Not true.
Far out, this guy.
So you're feeling pretty good at this stage. The only other undefeated person is Phil, or Wreath, as he's known on the socials and the Longshanks event. So I feel like you could probably look at the Longshanks data here and make a pretty confident assessment as to what Wreath was going to play in that final round, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So I think he played, what was his squad? So he had the Talzin box, Dooku, Kraken, Magna, which he played in his first round. And then every single round after that, he played Vader, Obi-2 Arfs, Maul, Jango Supers, which is, between the secondaries he's picked and the fact that he's just, got his other squad out of the way and then run that one all the way through. Yeah, I think that was the easiest pick. Even before I think we were talking at the end of his round 4 game, and he was saying how happy he was he could just play this squad. So it was very, very. There was no poker to be had, no poker face there. He was very clearly, this is the best squad, and I don't care what I play against, which is honestly a pretty reasonable stance with that squad. It's very, very strong, and that also made my squad choice very easy because again, I'm seeing Vader, I'm seeing Obi-2, I'm seeing Maul, I'm seeing Super Commandos. That's a lot of wound potential, right? So I felt honestly more confident going into this game than into the game with you, Tom, just because I like my Talzin Dooku squad better. It just feels good with my style, and this was more of the list I've sort of set myself up to counter. It definitely wasn't an easy match. It was another three struggle with I think I got the first struggle reasonably quickly. That was probably the easiest of them, purely because Wreath, the bottom of his deck was Vader and then Shatterpoint, which was a bit rough for him because it just meant that I could, get enough models on the side where, on the point on the side where his Vader was. This was another Sabotage Showdown, where he just went, by the time Vader activated, he wasn't as influential as he is when he comes out early and can just, insta-wound something, Shatterpoint insta-wound something else, and then sort of steamroll from there. So that was a bit lucky. And then the other 2 struggles were both definitely challenging. But yeah, just having that first struggle win meant I could sort of just hold position and get through it.
Yeah, and then you were the winner. So again, massive congratulations, and thanks so much for going through those games sort of step by step. And I hope the listeners garnered something out of how you approach those games and how you approach your squad design or your strike team design. Because I think we are now getting to or are at the stage where you can start saying, all right, well, look, I feel like I can predict XYZ will appear on the table at least once or twice, and having a tech piece for that in my Premier strike team is a really good idea. So I really like how you've gone about designing your Premier strike team. And Cameron, do you have anything to add or ask?
The one thing I would like to hear from you, Luke, is if you had advice for anyone who, say, maybe went 2 and 3 because they sort of hobbled together a mess of a Premier strike team. What advice would you be giving to people now as they prep for, say, ArcCon in Melbourne in April?
Yeah, gotcha. So I think you're exactly right that a lot of it is thinking about what you're going to face, right? And my feel at the moment in terms of broad categories of what you're going to see a lot of is the hyper aggressive lists, the Vader plus something aggressive that's just going to try and do a bunch of wounds and take control that way. The sort of your droid swarm or soon to be Ewok swarm, that sort of I'm going to move a bunch of units really quickly, and as long as if they're not wounded, then you're going to have problems because they're just going to swarm points and you're not going to be able to keep up with it. And then Talzin Dooku or Dooku Ahsoka is probably the other big one, which is the really reactive. Just if you wound things, I'm going to come back at you. I think those are broadly the big ones, and then everything else is sort of more or less a mix of that. I think Republic Obi's a little bit its own thing, so you need an answer for it. So I think you sort of need to have a clear idea of what you're playing into, and then from there decide what are the roles your squads are going to play.
No, that's really good, and also reps. Joining the TTS leagues, a fantastic way to get reps against people you might not have played against before. See new lists that are appearing, because people love to see a new list, take it, try it into the TTS league, and if it finds success, that's one way we start to see things rising to the top.
I think probably between the TTS league and in person, it was probably 2 games a week plus a couple of weekend events. But yeah, I 100% agree. This is a game that really rewards reps. I
definitely.
Think as long as you're sort of building out of the obvious synergies or have built some synergies of your own from cobbling them together, if you put reps in, you're going to do well.
So look, there's just 2 things that I sort of want to touch on before, we let you go. But the first is you mentioned after the event when Cameron came over to you and had a bit of a chat that you stated that you felt quite lucky that you didn't see any Obi Mace.
Yeah, look, I think that's a bit of an uncomfortable matchup for me because I don't like my Talzin Dooku squad into it all that much. And because then my other choice is to just go into a mirror, and then it has to be a skill game, right? And I'd much rather play better and have an edge than just purely have to play better. And because I think once you're that closely matched, if you're a closely matched player, then it comes down to dice, which is not where you want to be, right?
Yeah, cool. And look, we won't harp on, I guess, about the statistics of the event too much. What I will do is put the link to the event in the show notes, so any of you listeners can go and check it out and look at what was played and what was popular, etc. But I do want to ask you sort of the state of Obi. Maybe it's popular here in Australia, but I think this is quite emblematic of where Obi should be in the grand scheme of things. At Cancon, Obi was actually the most successful win rate primary with a win rate of 68%, which is massive. He had 19 games, 13 wins and 6 losses. Only 2 of them came from you as well. So there was a lot of Obi there. He was doing really, really good stuff. And yeah, I just wanted to ask you about your opinion on Obi and I guess what his secret sauce is, because it seems like the rest of the community sentiment is that he's not that fantastic, or at least GAR or Galactic Republic are not in a particularly good place. I personally, I don't want to say vehemently disagree, but I think GAR are fantastic. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think Obi is an interesting one. I think he's really, really good, particularly in Premier, because I think there's a lot of matches he's really good into. There's a lot of matches where it's honestly really uncomfortable to play into him anywhere you don't have diceless displacement. He's in a massive pain when everyone's got hunkers and just bouncing back to points, and it's a miserable experience, even aside from the fact that his activations themselves are quite impactful. That win rate does surprise me a little bit. I wouldn't have said he's the best, but I wonder if maybe it's just a bunch of people have picked the right matchups for him across the event, which has gotten him that really strong win rate.
And I think for listeners, if they want to take anything out of this brief discussion that we had about Obi, the one thing that I want to maybe anecdotally express is that I think that General Obi-Wan Kenobi, has a really good matchup into Mother Talzin and into Lord Maul. I know that it sounds a little strange me saying Lord Maul because of the fact that Obi doesn't want to be exposed, but if you can time Obi-Wan Kenobi's activation into Lord Maul or into Mother Talzin, I think Obi can shut down their next activations or their revenge shots beautifully. The second step disarm on Obi-Wan Kenobi's tree is instrumental, I think, in shutting off both Lord Maul and Mother Talzin. And I think I would encourage a lot of people to play into those games just to see how they go, because I really think that he has some strength into some of those Dathomirian squads.
Yeah, and I think we'll see a lot more of those as well, just because the synergy strength in that box off the shelf is so strong. I mean, most people who brought Talzin just played her. I think everyone, in fact, played her straight out of the box. And I think or close to, yeah. So definitely something to keep in mind about how that might play into what I think will be fairly relevant. She was, in terms of played, she was the third most played. She was brought by 12 players, 27 games. So you'll be seeing a lot of her, I believe.
Yep, and that actually, if you don't mind me jumping in with one other interesting thing I saw from the tournament, was who actually performed like lower than you would generally expect from sort of the talk online, and that was both Grievous and Vader. So Vader in particular was, I think, the second most taken after Maul, only a 42% win rate. I suspect that's mostly because there was a lot of Talzin and a lot of Dooku, which meant there was a lot of revenge effects. So I just found interesting because I think a lot of particularly the early discourse was about, Vader is the strongest thing out there. Vader is broken. Vader needs to be nerfed. And I think the communities quickly found that actually if you play the right things into him, he's good. He's not unbeatable or over the curve strong. I found that really interesting.
I do completely agree, and I'm glad to see that statistic has sort of calmed down. He's still incredibly popular, and we did talk about this last month with Morgan. He's the Dark Lord. He's Darth Vader. He's the Jedi Hunter. He's an incredibly easy primary to play and play well because of his aggressive nature and the ability for him to snowball. But I mean, yeah, you build correctly, you give people a platform to build premier strike teams, and I think he's just going to perform as well as anything else. So that was a really cool statistic to see. So Luke, thank you again so much for coming on to the podcast. Before we let you go, did you have anything else that you wanted to add or anything that you wanted to talk about at Cancon, or potentially any shout outs?
Yeah, look, I guess just a shout out to the Black Havoc crew. So that's the Victorian squad from way back X-Wing days. But I think we ended up being maybe 9 or 10 of the 30 people at the event, which was really cool to be able to travel with so many friends. And yeah, otherwise thanks you guys for having me on. And I guess probably actually especially thanks Michael for putting the event on. I thanked him in person multiple times, but he put so much work into that, and it came off beautifully. So that was awesome.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you, Luke. Massive congratulations again for winning the inaugural premier event here in Australia for Shatterpoint. You're down in the history books, and you've also got a massive target on your head, I think, for next time.
Excellent. Thanks.
All right, so now Tom and I, that was a great conversation that we just had with Luke there. Now we're going to move on to a different sort of Luke. Obviously, everyone's very excited about Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, the Emperor's servant. So Tom and I thought this would be a really great way to talk about these two new primaries that are coming into the game, how they might fit into the game as it stands now. We'll do a little bit of forward speculation, perhaps, about the roles they might fill long-term in what are really two new factions coming into the game. Obviously, Tom agrees we don't really have factions, but in a lot of ways we do, where around, we've got the errors, we've got keywords. We'll have a bit of discussion around that. We're going to talk a little bit about some squad building theory, and then also how Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker and the new Emperor's servant Darth Vader might fit into that squad building theory. You with me, Tom? We're ready to go?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing that I just wanted to preface is this isn't a box review. We're not going to be going through the abilities on these cards per se or their combat trees or anything like that. If you do want something of the sorts, Hello There did a really good episode on these new boxes, and they went through them in their entirety. So I'll put the show note link in the bottom if you guys want to just a sort of a straight box review. But this is more, as you've said, Cameron, an idea or maybe a prediction of where these guys are going to sit and how we're going to build strike teams with them.
Yeah, and I think, head to Shatterpoint DB, head to Point Break, any of your favorite squad builders. You'll be able to see what these guys can do. They do a lot of stuff. It's really interesting. And what we want to nut down here is really how do we think these guys are going to play into the game, and how are people going to be able to utilize them to squad build, to maybe change some of the current squads people are running and how they might run into those squads. So I guess the first thing we want to frame here is Morgan spoke last episode, and if you haven't listened to it, I really, really encourage you to go do so. Morgan spoke about his theory of squad building, which I really liked. Felt like that resonated with me. I'm sure that resonated with you, Tom.
Absolutely. Yep.
So he called it, and I love this, the rule of two. Basically, Morgan sees three key roles when he's building a premier squad, and he believes them to be diceless displacement, objective holders, and frontline brawlers. And those were his words. I think he called them objective potatoes, but I've decided to call them objective holders. And what he does is he brings two of each of those. He wants to make sure that in his full premier squad, he's got two of each. We've sort of expanded out, Tom and I've sort of gone back and forth about some other roles that, it's not an exhaustive list. These aren't game terms. These are just theories. These are game theories that we're sort of playing with at the moment. So there are many roles a unit can play. They could play no role, they could play multiple roles, but we think it's really handy as you're sitting down. There's so many options to choose from that it could be really handy to start thinking about a particular role you want filled in your squad, or maybe you've got a role missing in your squad, and how different units might play into that. So that's something that Tom and I might share on the Discord, which we should all be joining. If you're listening to this podcast, you should be jumping onto the Space Slugs Discord. We're going to be working on a little bit more around these roles and just to start some conversation, right? Because I think everyone's got their own ideas, everyone's got their own theories, and this is just, two idiots from Australia who've got some ideas, right, Tom?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this 2024 probably feels like, I guess for the Australians, the year of the Premier format. So having those rules of two guides or having those role guides in our strike team or in our Premier strike team, it just sound like they're worth it. And, you don't have to build a strike team like this whatsoever. I mean, the game completely functions fluidly and beautifully, and if you want to, competitively, without filling these or forming your strike teams like these. But I just think it's a good conversation to have, and maybe it resonates with more players like myself or like you, Cam, or like Luke, for example, who broke down his strike team really, really nicely, or his premier strike team. So
yeah. And the last thing we want to do is narrow anyone's thinking here. The idea is to broaden everyone's thinking. And me as a person, I really love putting things in boxes. I've always loved putting things in boxes. And when I say that, I mean, I like structure. It makes things a little bit easier for me to digest, to pass, to make sense of. So this is sort of where that thinking has come from. And that's just the frame we're using to look at Vader and to look at Luke and how they might play into our squad building decisions and also the meta just in general. So I guess we'll just dive into maybe some ideas of when we say diceless displacement, what exactly do we mean, Tom?
Yeah, so diceless displacement, I guess, at its core is purely being able to move one or more units without relying on dice. So I can walk up to you, I can move you off a point or move you closer to me and then take the point off of you. And a prime example of this might be Lord Maul with his There Is No Place to Run ability.
Yeah, and excitingly, we actually get a new diceless displacement in the new Vader box in the Stormtroopers. So that's really the first support unit that has diceless displacement. Someone can correct me.
Fifth brother and fourth sister.
Brother.
However,
Okay.
This is the first diceless displacement unit that we've seen that has two models in it. So that's really, really important and a good distinction to make.
Yeah, a more traditional support unit as we think of them. It's so funny to say traditional. The game's only 7 months old, but still traditional. There's only currently 2 units that are support units with a single model, single character. Sorry. So that's really exciting. So that's diceless displacement. We've got objective holders, which we've sort of taken a cue from Morgan here, and essentially someone who can comfortably sit on an objective. They're happy to take some damage, they're happy to be there, but their job is to be there, to hold the objective, and to make sure you keep scoring those points. Things like protection, steadfast, really, really helpful to achieve those goals.
Or just a big health pool as well.
Or just a big health pool. And I also think sort of large base miniature can really be helpful there as well, because they're a lot harder to move out of the way of, say, scatter terrain or other models. They are a little bit harder to push, because pushing is so important in this game. So that's an objective holder. I think in episode 1, Morgan describes the B2s as his preferred, or one of his favorite objective holders, because they just sit there, they've got protection, they'll just shoot at you, and maybe they'll get some out of activation movement, but realistically their job is to just get on a point and keep scoring it. And then the last one that Morgan defined for us was the frontline brawler.
Yeah, the frontline brawler. So this is basically units that can move forward, take objectives, trade blows, and usually end up with a positive result. And, they probably don't mind being attacked, being that in melee or ranged. And, of course, they benefit from extra movement as well. So these are units like the Mandalorian Super Commandos that Luke had previously stated that gave him a lot of grief. Probably any support that's in that 8+ health range, so including the bounty hunters as well. They're quite a durable, nice unit. And then, of course, there's things like Magna Guard, who really only sing when they're getting some out of activation movement and separatist synergy, whereas Mandalorians and bounty hunters and other 8 health support just can splash in as great frontline brawler units for any of the premier strike teams that you're trying to create.
Yeah, and I think also it's important not to, I mean, again, these aren't specific, they're not exhaustive, but someone like Grievous also can fill that role if you need him as well. He's very quick. He can get up there, and people are terrified of Grievous. You see Grievous activating and you start wondering, okay, where exactly is he going to go and who is he going to kill? So, it's not just going to be frontline brawlers aren't always just support units. It's going to be secondaries. It's going to be primaries as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, it's a really good distinction to make there with General Grievous. The reason that he's such a strong frontline brawler in a primary character is because of his cunning warlord defensive expertise. So whilst he might be taking a lot of damage, if you don't get a pin on him or something similar, he'll probably just be able to come straight back onto the point. And, really other strong, durable primaries such as Darth Vader, they don't have that capacity. Anakin doesn't have that capacity to do that. Mace doesn't have the capacity to do that unless they've got bringing support from other units. So, yeah, I just thought I'd add that in as well.
Yeah, no, great clarification there. And so those are the 3 that we're sort of that Morgan has identified as you really want to be getting 2 of each of those in your premier squad. And that is obviously 4 strike teams. So it's a very broad, a lot of units to utilize to try and fill those gaps. But that's something Morgan identified and we tend to agree with. There are some other ones that we won't go too in depth on, pretty self-explanatory stuff. Beat Stick, Darth Vader Jedi Hunter is the prime example, Anakin Skywalker the other. Mace Windu. These are basically high damage output. They've got consistency. They've got good expertise trees to get crits through. Lots of damage early on their combat tree. Usually they're one-shotting a support, most of the secondaries and a few low health primaries. Just look at Darth Vader Jedi Hunter. You'll understand what we mean by that.
I think one real key thing that I'd like the community to start thinking of when they look at a beat stick or a character that can do a lot of damage is A, the expertise tree, how reliable or consistent that expertise tree is. Characters like Darth Vader Jedi Hunter have an incredibly consistent expertise tree, as does Anakin Skywalker and General Grievous. And they also benefit from the fact that they can do 7 damage in 3 successes, which in my mind is sort of where I'm aiming for. The way that I've built a lot of my Anakin Skywalker strike teams and tactics and strategy has been utilizing that 7 damage in 3. And I feel like if I gravitated towards Darth Vader Jedi Hunter or Mace Windu, I'd be trying to utilize that high damage output of a beat stick that's consistent, right? I'm not just going to try and use any other character to do a lot of damage. So yeah, I think that's a really good way of trying to frame how you want to use these characters.
Yeah, and beat stick doesn't necessarily mean they're a simple character, and usually a lot of these beat sticks will be able to fill other roles as well. But yeah, again, just ways for us to really think about squad building. And then we have something like a tank, which I don't think is necessarily too strict of an idea and not always that useful, but they're usually a character that's got a good defensive spread, solid defensive expertise. Examples, Tom, you could think of?
Yeah, so tanks would be, in my mind, General Obi-Wan Kenobi, because he's great at taking ranged attacks. He can get himself back onto points because of his identity. And then, more reactive ability-based characters such as Ahsoka Tano, Jedi No More. She's a tank because she can half damage in melee. Mace Windu is great if he's engaged, because not only does he have a fantastic expertise chart on defense, but he also gets steadfast and protection when he's engaged. So stuff like that.
Yeah, and Count Dooku, he's got the abilities to
Completely agree.
just turn off your attacks. And I think one that surprised a lot of people on the weekend, Cancon, possibly because she's not played that much, is Aura Singh. A lot of the time, if you're making an attack into Aura Singh, you're not really doing much. She's got a really great defensive expertise. So that's just stuff to think about. They're sort of the characters you don't mind putting in risky situations because they've got some outs. And then the last two roles that Tom and I sort of see are playmakers. Tom, do you want to try and explain what we mean by playmaker?
Yeah, so playmakers are probably something that, as you develop your Shatterpoint acumen, are going to be something that you start gravitating towards more. And these basically enable big swings, and they're not only really impactful on the table, but they're incredibly fun to set up. But also, if you don't get them right, they leave you hanging quite badly. And if you want to see a prime example of that, you can go to our YouTube channel and check out my game against Olek. We previewed some of the new Ewoks on TTS. So go and check that out and see playmakers like Asajj Ventress being used to poor effect. But these are big swing characters. So they can utilize their own abilities or utilize other units to essentially swing two or more objectives, right? So these are characters like Asajj Ventress. She has beautiful pushes on her combat tree. She has a force push as well, which she can often trigger for free. So that means she can influence a lot of objectives. Mother Talzin has, again, a really strong ranged attack, but she also has manipulating hand, which can just dash people away. So yeah, characters like that can influence multiple objectives and score you multiple points.
Yeah, these are the ones where you get their activation and they probably take the most amount of thought because you need to make sure you want to maximize their activation, because they're not a B2 battle droid. They're not just going to walk forward, maybe push someone, maybe get some damage in and sit on a point. These are the ones who they've got a lot of tricks in their pocket, and they're going to try and swing two objectives, maybe more if you're very lucky and set it up well. And then the last one, Tom, do you want to run us through the last one as well?
Yeah, so these are enablers, and this is probably what we're going to focus on a little bit in terms of framing or putting Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker and Emperor Servant Darth Vader into a box, as Cameron was stating before. So enablers essentially unlock keyword abilities for a strike team. So keyword synergy that you'd probably build around, and this probably is going to direct your unit choices. And I think the one that we've seen the most of at this stage is the Separatist keyword and the Clone keyword, or the Galactic Republic keyword, I should say. And the two ones that come to my mind that have been released right now, as of the 2nd of February, would be General Obi-Wan Kenobi with his hunker shenanigans, thanks to knowledge and defense. And then also, Count Dooku as well with Separatist keywords, or the super tactical droids swing to mind as well.
Yeah, with the battle droids, their droid synergy. Yeah, and the enablers are very much more, and the whole framing of this is around squad building. So sometimes, you're going to bring a Magna Guard because you want them to be a frontline brawler, but if you're not playing them right or you don't build the squad correctly, you're not necessarily going to be able to get that sort of role out of them, that use out of them. But this is just a way for us to start thinking about, when we're squad building, what sort of things do I want to be doing in my squad, and who can I identify fill these roles, and what do I want to be doing with these roles? So again, we'll share this sort of theory that we're framing onto our Discord, and would love to get some feedback and get some thought going and some conversation going on it, because I think squad building theory is one of my favorite things, Tom. It was when we were playing X-Wing, that was one of my favorite things to do, was to try and fit all these little pieces together and make something weird happen and work and be beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. I nearly failed many a university assignment because Cameron and I were just talking about ways to fit in a unique little upgrade for the next big X-Wing event. So 100% agree. This is one of my favorite things to do if I've got nothing to do.
And even when he has something to do.
Oh, yeah.
That's still his favorite thing. So having said all of that, and I hope that was an overload for everyone, and I really, really would love to hear people's thoughts on that, just that general theory. But we're going to take that theory, we're going to use that as some framing around the two probably most exciting characters we've had injected into Shatterpoint so far, would you say?
Oh, big time. Yeah. So, I mean, it was very exciting seeing Darth Vader Jedi Hunter come into the game, but In my mind, I thought that release, the model is beautiful, but I thought that the release was relatively disappointing in terms of the one-dimensional sort of scale that Darth Vader Jedi Hunter brings to the table, right? He's got one role. He does it pretty well. He's going to wound people fairly consistently, but he doesn't do much. He's definitely not an enabler, right? He's not an objective holder either in my mind, right? Seeing Darth Vader Emperor's Servant come out and Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker, I mean, yeah, super cool, super exciting.
Yeah, Dips, I think Vader Jedi Hunter could fill a frontline brawler role if you needed it, but he also just sort of can melt if he gets put under too much pressure. So Emperor's Servant does fill a, I think, very different role. I think we'll start with Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker as a conversation piece, Tom, and how we think he might fit into the roles and into the game just in general as well. So what are your initial thoughts on Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker and how he's going to fit into the game?
Yeah, sure. So if we're going to frame the whole conversation around the roles that we just described, I would say that Luke, first and foremost, probably comes in as an objective holder. So he's got some really, really great defensive abilities in the fact that he's got an ability called I Will Not Fight You. If he gets attacked in melee, he can spend one force. And essentially, if a failure was rolled in the attack roll, he not only gets to heal twice, but he also gets to jump. So he'll be able to clear off any pins and he'll be able to jump straight back onto the objective, assuming he doesn't get wounded. So that's a really strong ability that I see. And combined with Deflect, I think that he's quite an unattractive target in all capacity, right? You don't want to shoot him and you definitely don't want to melee him because he's just going to come straight back on. So I see him as a really great objective holder. I see him as a really good tank as well because his identity means that he's often going to be immune to either expose or pin. I do think he'll be a playmaker, but I don't think he'll be an enabler.
So I actually, I do agree with what you've said, definitely. I think Luke fills a lot of roles. I think he's sort of a jack of all trades. We were talking earlier, we think he's very much a pick and drop. You can sort of drop him into nearly any squad with an idea of how that squad will work and he'll still get value, right? And we likened that to the idea of Darth Vader Jedi Hunter. He can pretty much go in any squad, right? You can pair him with anyone and you're going to get a lot of value out of him because he just hits hard. Whereas I think Luke, because he's so independent and he can do so much on his own, you don't want to shoot at him. He can move fairly quickly with that jump. So he's not the quickest ever, but he does get an extra short move. His ability, I Will Not Fight You, is really strong. The idea of jumping and healing, double healing and then jumping after an attack means he's going to be very sticky. So I agree. He's going to be very good at holding objectives down. But I do see him as a frontline brawler. Maybe that's just my playstyle. You and I know, disagree here, but I actually do value his diceless displacement. You can either profit from this or be destroyed. I think he fills that role as well, but I think maybe you disagree on that, Tom.
So I think that one of the strongest abilities that Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker brings is you can either profit by this or be destroyed. So real quick for the listeners, you choose an active objective within 2 of Luke Skywalker. Each enemy character contesting that objective may dash. Then one character in this unit, being Luke Skywalker, may dash toward that objective and make a 5 dice melee attack. Now, that doesn't have to be into any particular target. The only condition that you need to meet there with Luke is the fact that you need to start that whole cascade of triggers within 2 of an active objective. So I think that's a phenomenal ability. I think it's like levels of Anakin Skywalker double tap that we haven't really seen in the game yet, and I'm incredibly excited. But I don't think it's diceless displacement because your opponent gets to choose where they want to go. So that's just sort of my thinking there.
Yeah, I think if we look at it as on a grading scale, I wouldn't put it up high. The drawback of your opponent deciding who does and doesn't move, where they move, is a big drawback. But the threat of you getting punched in the face by Luke Skywalker, he's possibly healing, he's pushing you, maybe he's jumping, maybe he's getting a full reposition off that second attack, is enough to cause some concern for people. I will agree that, yeah, it's not the best diceless displacement in the game, but I would still, if I'm building my squad, I'm going to be happy I've got that diceless displacement, I would still tick that box for Luke. But I can understand and agree with your reasoning behind not ticking that box for Luke.
Yeah, look, I think I do agree with you in terms of the fact that I wouldn't feel obliged or necessarily incentivized to also fit in a diceless displacement character with Luke. I think that unlike a lot of other primaries that lack diceless displacement, Luke can confidently go up and take an objective that has two characters from different units on them, right? So he's going to move up to an objective. Let's say you've got a Magna Guard and a B2 battle droid there. He's going to use, you can either profit by this or be destroyed on the B2 battle droid, and he'll probably get that shoved off because of his excellent Sorosu tree. And then he can use his actual attack to attack the Magna Guard and also shove that off. So I guess maybe I don't see it as diceless displacement because he's still making attacks, right? I think that the strength of him is being able to move people away, but still almost rely on the fact that you are rolling dice. So I think he's an excellent, like, I'm going to control this objective. You can put two bodies on it, but I'm still going to take it off you, which I love. I think he's incredibly strong. But yeah, I think maybe we'll just differ on the actual definition of the diceless displacement. And I think he fills that role as adequately as Maul or Django or something similar.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. And yeah, and I'd be really interested to hear what people think as well about how we're sort of evaluating Luke here. Do you think in terms of, this is our first Rebel Alliance box. Do you think he's going to make a good Rebel Alliance, air quotes, enabler? You know, I hesitate to say leader, but enabler. Do you think he's going to be an enabler for the Rebel Alliance?
No, I don't. He doesn't have any keyword synergy other than the fact that, you know, when Rebel Alliance characters come in with things like coordinated fire or something similar. But yeah, at this stage, he does nothing for your Rebel team outside of being a fantastic primary. But no, I don't think he'll be an enabler.
Yeah, so do you think we're going to see him, and I mean, it's still early days, a little bit of speculation here, but do you think we're going to see him a lot with Rebels, or is he going to find a way to maybe sit with some Ewoks? Is he going to be, you know, eventually we're going to get characters in this era that aren't a Rebel or a Galactic Empire? Do you think he's going to be comfortable slotting into all those different, with lots of different supports and lots of different secondaries? I think he'll be a mainstay for a while.
I completely agree. Yeah, I think he'll be everywhere.
Like a Maul, right? Like a Maul,
yes.
Where Maul, you can just sort of put him with anyone from that era and he's going to get value and you're not going to be too stressed about it.
100%. Yeah, so he's definitely not as fast as Maul, but he is, in my mind, a Maul-esque character without a ranged attack, which is a big drawback, right?
Yeah,
but
it is
he doesn't really have a lot of force intensity, like very similarly to Maul. Maul has his own sort of economy. So does Luke in his own activation, at least. Like, he's getting a force back when he activates because of Return of the Jedi, his ability. He gets to refresh a force and jump. And then he's probably only spending that on in his activation on you can either profit by this or be destroyed, right? So he doesn't actually use any force for your team in his activation, quote unquote.
Yeah, and that ability, which we both agree is very powerful, you can either profit, is essentially free for him as long as he's not the first activation you've got in your deck rotation, right?
Yeah, it might feel a little bit strange, but I think getting an early Shatterpoint and just using that on Luke is going to be awesome because you're going to be able to put him on a point. His order card will still be in the order deck, so he'll be immune to expose, and you're just not going to shake him off a point unless you outnumber him. And then when he actually draws his order card, you can almost certainly take the point back. He's probably the most exciting release that we've had so far, for me at least.
I agree. For me, it's more around just how much he does and how differently he does it. So the order deck, you can draw him, and if he's still sitting in a really good position and someone's got ARF troopers and they've got Night Sisters and you really don't want to be exposed, you just put him in reserve and he's just going to sit there happy. You're not going to be able to expose him. You're not going to be able to turn off those defensive expertise, which are pretty decent. He's got a pretty decent expertise tree. And it's really exciting. I think it's really exciting when we get a versatile. It's great and awesome when we get a really focused character that does, you know, Mother Talzin. Love Mother Talzin. She's awesome. She's very focused though. So if I'm playing her, I'm almost certainly bringing her whole box with me. But with Luke, he may never see Boosh and Lando and R2-D2 ever again. I may never bother.
100%. You could be absolutely correct. What techniques or pieces of utility or tools are you going to bring in your Premier Strike team, do you think, to be able to handle Luke? And the main one that I see is diceless displacement. I think having a team that relies on diceless displacement, or at least features heavy diceless displacement, is going to be key to beating Luke Skywalker.
Diceless displacement for sure, because attacking Luke is just bad. But anything with coordinated fire strain, I think at the moment that's 501st.
Oh, the return of the 501st. Here we go.
Anyone else? Does anyone else have it?
The Wolfpack have coordinated fire strain. You know what's going to be really strong? Disarm. Coordinated fire disarm from
yes.
the Handmaidens is going to be clutch, because that
Very
turns off
true.
his amazing expertise tree on Sorasu.
Yeah, very true. I think that will be really, really powerful. The strains and disarms, because, it's going unsaid here, I guess, as we're discussing conditions, but he's either immune to expose or he's immune to pin.
Or both, if he's in the reserve.
Yeah, so if he's in reserve, he's immune to both. So you really can't be relying. And I think at the moment, I think what's really interesting about that ability is because those are two of the most common conditions. I think of all the conditions I received at Cancon on the weekend, expose and pin were the number ones by far. That's what everyone's trying to get onto the table, onto each of the units, right, at the moment.
Yeah, and that's why it's so exciting to see a character like Luke, who's going to be a powerhouse, sort of force the reshape of of Premier Strike Team building, which is super cool. So yeah, I think, if the listeners, which is one of our sort of mission statements, if the listeners were going to take one piece of information out of our Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker roles or counter roles, would be, I think, diceless displacement, because you're turning off deflect, and you're turning off I will not fight you. So some really, really strong ways to turn off his kit, and you don't care about I am a Jedi like my father before me and his immunity to conditions. So Django, Maul, Mother Talzin, I mean, all of these, yeah. And Boosh, actually. I think Boosh is going to be a really good way of dealing with Luke, as are the Stormtroopers in Emperor's Servant Darth Vader's kit.
So, yeah, I guess at the moment, if you're looking to fill an objective holding role in your squad, maybe you want some not so good diceless displacement, according to Tom. Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker is a really good unit to bring and fit that bill. You'd be a little bit restricted because obviously at the moment there's not a huge amount of units that can play in the era that Luke is in, but obviously this will be some good advice for the future as well. That's what Luke's going to bring to the table, we feel anyway, at the moment.
And I'd be very, very interested to see where he sits in a month or 2 months' time, just as the game develops and as the TTS League gets sort of looked at.
Yeah, and this will be his first TTS League as well, right?
Yeah.
Season 3?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Episode 3, sorry. Very, very exciting. So please, if anyone's got any more thoughts or anything they think we got wrong, any conversation you want to have around Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker, please jump in the Discord. We'd love to have a chat with people about their thoughts on it, because we're obviously just two people.
What'd you say before? 2 idiots from Australia?
Yeah, 2 idiots, 2 absolute knuckleheads from Australia.
That should be the new podcast name, 2 idiots from Australia.
I don't know. I paid a lot of money for that logo, so maybe we won't. Anyway, moving on to Tom's favourite character. Not true. But many people's favourite character, Darth Vader, the Emperor's servant.
You just real quick before we go on.
Okay.
My favourite character from the original trilogy is Han Solo. I am so excited for Han Solo, and my favourite character from the prequel trilogy would be, Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan. However, as we've sort of gone on, Hayden Christensen has developed a very, very important place in my heart, especially, via Ahsoka and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Anyway, I just thought I'd let you know, guys, that my favorite character in this era is by and large Han Solo, and I feel like I'm the only one excited for it, but anyway, that's just me.
Yeah, we did at the weekend. It's really good to point out. We talked about characters we thought might be coming when we were having beers after day one. We were talking about characters we thought might be coming to Shatterpoint and who we're excited about. And the whole table erupted in excitement around the idea of Qui-Gon Jinn and a dual pack with Obi-Wan Padawan and Darth Maul. And everyone got really excited. And then Tom, he jumped in and he said, yeah, Nick, who's excited for Han Solo? And it was just silence. And I don't think that's a comment necessarily on Tom's clout, because Tom's got a lot of clout. It was more just people just aren't that excited about Han Solo. I don't know why. Maybe it's a topic of conversation we can have on another episode, maybe.
Put it in the Discord. Let us know.
Please, Tom needs friends. Cool. So Darth Vader, and I think Darth Vader has been a big topic of conversation. I'm sure he was during the reign of the Galactic Empire as well. But he's been a big topic of conversation around Shatterpoint, and that's specifically around Jedi Hunter. And really interestingly, and not to drive off into to another topic, but I think one of the reasons he's been so popular and he had such a big showing at Cancon is simply because he's Darth Vader. He's my favorite model that I've got. He's such an iconic villain. He's so cool. You love to play as Darth Vader. But I feel like that was the imposter Vader. This is the true Vader we remember from A New Hope, from Empire Strikes Back, and from Return of the Jedi. This is the Vader. So I think regardless of whether or not this Vader is good, he's going to see a lot of play over the next couple of months. So I think it's important that we understand his role, who we think he might pair well with, because I think he's going to be very, very popular.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so look, in terms of the roles that we think, or at least I think, I'll go first, that Emperor's Servant Darth Vader performs. I think he is a beatstick. I think his Gem So combat tree is going to do a lot of damage very reliably, especially because he can use his anger, hatred, and aggression ability to add dice and, spike up to 10 or 11 dice on either ranged or melee. So I think he's a great beatstick. He's going to be able to do a lot of damage, which is going to be really strong. And I also think that he plays really nicely into the tank sort of category, which Jedi Hunter didn't do particularly well. I felt like Jedi Hunter could get what I would say ragdolled quite a lot because he had no crit mitigation. He had no great expertise on his defense, but the new Vader does, I think. He's got the defensive form, which turns crits to strikes on his Form 5 Gem So, and on his Form 5 Xian, each result that he rolls as an expertise will actually add a heal or two into the roll. So that's going to be really great in terms of making sure that he's sort of fit and healthy and conditionless, which I think is super strong.
Well, I guess his defensive form healing isn't that important because the downside of that anger, hate, aggression is the expose that you get should you roll any failure results, which is almost guaranteed to happen when you're rolling 10 to 11 dice. So I think that's going to be really important. That's a big downside for him in that tank, I think, where you're saying he fits a tank role. I think that expose is going to be a big drawback for him. If he wants to fill a tank role, I think you need to lean less on the anger, hate, aggression.
I think one good play, before we get into his roles specifically, one good play is due to the fact that he can shuffle himself back into the deck thanks to his identity called You Cannot Hide Forever. I think a really good play pattern for Darth Vader, Emperor's Servant, will be going early, and not necessarily wounding anyone or even using anger, hate, and aggression. Let's just say he's your first pick of the deck. You move him onto an objective and you take it. I think that's really strong. And then once the game starts rolling, I think a really common play pattern is going to be anger, hate, and aggression to dash into melee, then swing for a big attack, and then the second action actually be a heal to get rid of the expose. So I think that's a really good way of making sure that he's always turned on in his Form 5 Xian form and making sure that his expertise stays online. So yeah, I just thought I'd add that. I think that's a really...
That's great, and that leads perfectly into where I see him fitting, especially in the Rule of Two, Morgan's famous Rule of Two. I see him as a frontline brawler. He's someone you want to get into the fight ASAP because he's going to be doing a lot of pushing, a lot of pinning. He only gets one crit, but he's guaranteed to get a push and 2 damage off 1 expertise, assuming he's not disarmed. And I think that's really powerful. And he's got a range 4 gun as well. It's only 5 dice. Also, importantly, anger, hate, aggression does work on his ranged attacks as well. But I really like your point that a lot of the play pattern is going to be anger, hate, aggression, heal. I think we'll see a lot of that. Anger, hate, aggression, combat, heal. So one thing we didn't talk about with Luke Skywalker was the preferred mission pack. And we've only got 2 mission packs at the moment as of February 2024. Where do you think Vader prefers? Is he more of a shifting priorities? Does he like Sabotage Showdown? I think he maybe prefers to be in a more tighter cluster of objectives, but I'm interested to hear your thought.
Yeah. So I think Darth Vader will prefer Sabotage Showdown for the reasons that you've just stated. It will allow him to get into the fight early, but then when he shuffles back into the deck, he can start dashing, attacking, and then healing. So Sabotage Showdown will definitely sort of lend itself to that play pattern, I think. I don't really see Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knight, minding about the mission pack. I think that he's going to be fast enough to dart around and make the most of all of his abilities. Whereas Darth Vader, Emperor's Servant, will probably prefer Sabotage Showdown a lot.
So with the Emperor's Servant, what other than the roles that we've outlined, where do you think people are going to draw their most value out of Vader? Obviously, his ability, you cannot hide forever. If you've activated him using his order card and he doesn't wound someone, he shuffles back into the deck to be redrawn during this deck rotation, which is crazy.
If you want to see a really good use of that ability, check out the preview game that I did with Kevin C on our YouTube. There's a moment where essentially Kevin's guaranteed to win a particular struggle, and he doesn't want to use one of his other big powerhouse characters as the last activation in the struggle, right? Because that's sort of a waste. Like, why would I want to use Anakin Skywalker if I'm already guaranteed to win that struggle? So he manages to actually draw Darth Vader, Emperor's Servant, which is fantastic. He attacks into a character of mine, pushes them off one of the objectives that might be active for the next struggle, and then shuffles him straight back into the deck. And that, in my mind, sells this Darth Vader to me immediately. And I want to highlight the fact that I think that the main value that people are going to get out of this Darth Vader is actually as an enabler, because not only can he have some fantastic control over your order deck, but his innate ability called Perhaps I Can Find New Ways to Motivate Them reads, when a character in this unit wounds an enemy unit, after the effect is resolved, another allied Galactic Empire character may dash. So he has some incredible board control that you just do not see out of Darth Vader Jedi Hunter. And I'm super keen to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, I think he does. He very much can fill a playmaker role here as well. Him being able to use a ranged attack to maybe knock someone off a point and flip it back towards your favor, then move himself onto a different point to steal. And then also, if he wounds someone during that attack, he then gets to move a different Galactic Empire unit, which is really strong. You know, in a perfect scenario, he could potentially swing 3 points, which is, that's the definition of a playmaker in my mind. And he really will be able to wound people, not necessarily at a whim, but he's going to be in a very good position a lot of the time to do so, especially because he's just going to be activating a lot. He's going to be probably the unit you activate the most, simply because of his You Cannot Hide Forever ability. So he's definitely going to be a playmaker, a beat stick, a frontline brawler, and as you're saying, Tom, an enabler. So very much around that same question I asked on Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker as to whether or not you think he'll be an enabler for Rebel Alliance. Do you, Tom, think that if you're building a Galactic Empire squad, at least for now, but also in the future, do you think Darth Vader, Emperor's Servant, is going to be your linchpin? Is he going to be the one you choose to bring to bring the best out of the Galactic Empire?
Yeah, I think big time, actually. I think we talked about this briefly with Luke Thompson, the Cancon winner, as we said before, and we sort of touched on the idea that a lot of the top players at Cancon, not top players in general, just the top performers at Cancon, really settled on a strike team A of 2 squads and a strike team B of 2 squads that were very different and performed very different roles. And we hadn't really noticed someone building a strike team around one specific squad. We saw Morgan do that in TTS episode 1, where he built everything around Darth Vader, Jedi Hunter, Jango Fett, and ARF Troopers, and then cycled in different rosters. But I think this Darth Vader, Emperor's Servant, is probably the first step in giving you a proper primary that you can fully build an affiliation around, that being Galactic Empire. So I actually see him as being a massive enabler and a big linchpin for the Galactic Empire to build around myself.
Where do you see that value coming from?
Yeah, so I see that as the ability for him to be sort of force neutral, and that he brings 3 force and he doesn't really spend 3 force because he's always going to refresh 1 at the start of his activation. He's got some incredible battlefield control with his You Cannot Hide Forever, so you can really sort of leverage the ability for him to repeatedly activate to gain control over a particular flank or something similar. And Perhaps I Can Find New Ways to Motivate Them. Him wounding someone and then dashing a Galactic Empire character, I think is incredibly strong. I think he's going to be incredibly flexible for you to build a strike team around, and he's also going to give your Galactic Empire units just a lot of utility and flexibility on the actual table.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I do have a different perspective, only because when I'm looking at enablers, I'm thinking of the super tactical droids, I'm thinking of General Obi-Wan Kenobi, and these guys have, those units have very strong keyword synergy, multiple abilities. General Obi-Wan Kenobi. In his case, it's a constant battlefield change. He's constantly affecting your squad, and he benefits greatly from that squad being Galactic Republic. So I think I disagree. I agree for now because really Vader, I mean, the only other Galactic Empire leader we have is other Vader or Grand Inquisitor, and neither of them really can fill that role at the moment. Grand Inquisitor is more of an Inquisitor enabler than anything else. I think you definitely will bring Vader, much like you'll bring Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker. If you're going to run Rebel Alliance and you've got Rebel Alliance keyword synergy already, you're probably going to run Luke Skywalker, but I don't think you lead with Luke Skywalker in terms of building that premier list. But I also don't think you necessarily lead with Vader going, I really want to build the best Galactic Empire list around what he's bringing and what he's doing differently to, say, what Grand Moff Tarkin might do down the right line or what Moff Gideon might do down the line, that sort of thing. But maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? Only one way to find out.
And speaking of the one way to find out, we previously committed here at the Space Slugs that we were going to do one episode per month. This episode in February, I guess we're so excited not only to be bringing for the first time episode 3 of the TTS League to the people. We're actually for the first time running the TTS League, which is going to be super exciting.
Space Slugs presents
Space Slugs presents episodes 3 of the TTS League, absolutely. But also, we're so excited to bring you some of these stats based on Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, Emperor's Servant, that we're actually going to have in the last week of February, a bit of a statistics roundup, much like I did with Morgan last month, but basically just focused on the impact on the meta that Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader are shaping up to have. So stay tuned for that in the last week of Feb, because that's going to be super exciting.
Wait, so Tom, are you saying that we're going to have 2 episodes of the Space Slugs Shatterpoint podcast in February?
It must be 11 p.m. because, yes, we are.
Wow,
Your wish is coming
everyone.
true. You are getting 2 episodes in February of the Space Slugs, so stay tuned. It's going to be awesome.
That's awesome. And as always, we're really excited to hear people's feedback. If you liked this sort of discussion and you want us to have more discussions similar to this, please let us know. We're still trying stuff out. We really want to find what we think is giving value to the community, because that's the goal, right, Tom? That the goal is for you to listen to this podcast, get a little bit of insight, take something away, be better at Shatterpoint. And we hope we've done that either from Luke Thompson's wonderful breakdown of his Cancon win, or this discussion we're having now about how we think these 2 really impactful primaries are going to shape the game as we know it moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Cameron, you said that you're going to whack the role descriptions up on the Discord. If you guys aren't a Discord member, it is free. Much like you participating or listening to this podcast, we want every time that you sort of jump into that Discord to take something away and be a better Shatterpoint player, or take something away from or for the community. So yeah, jump in. All the descriptions and the links that you need are going to be in the episode show notes anyway. So yeah, come on in, say hello, and start the discussion about Shatterpoint with us.
Yeah, please do. And if you've got any more ideas on your own squad building theory, we'd love to hear it. If you've got any more theories around other roles that we should probably try and highlight, there are definitely some characters out there who don't really fit one of these roles that we've initially sort of thought about. So really interested to expand this idea and get feedback on it and hear other people's ideas. We'd love to highlight other squad building theories other than Morgan Reed, other than Tom and Cameron. We'd love to get some more feedback. And actually, one of the best ways, if you really want to help the podcast, if you like what we're doing so far, you're liking the battle reports, you're liking the live streams, the best way to support us, other than to jump in the Discord, is to join our Patreon.
We've got all of the links down in the show notes that you can use. Go and check out our YouTube channel as well, because we usually do weekly or bi-weekly videos there, both in like a straight video upload or a edited down version of some of our battle reports. So you can see me play a couple of games, including my finals game of the Never Tell Me the Odds League with Anakin and General Obi-Wan Kenobi up against a very good player called Evil Houdini. There's a lot of ways to absorb our content. the easiest one is to check out our description below and go from there.
Thanks very much, Tom, for joining me on this journey here today. Out of Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader the
I'm
Emperor's
going to answer
Servant.
right now. It's going to be Jedi Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, me too.
It's not even a debate.
Who will you paint first? Will it be Luke simply because you're going to put him on the table first, or Vader because he's pretty easy?
Well, let me give you a run through. I've undercoated the Stormtroopers because the first strike team that I want to put on the table is actually going to be Jedi Hunter Darth Vader and the Stormtroopers, and then Luke's box. So the way that I'm going through it is painting Stormtroopers, the Stormtrooper Sergeant, and the Stormtroopers, and then Luke's box as a whole.
Wow, that is a bit surprising, actually. That's very cool. I think I'm probably also going to put... Actually, you know what? Now that you've said that, I'm going to do Emperor's Servant first.
Awesome.
I'm putting him on the table first, I think.
And let's put it up in the Shatterpoint Discord, the Slugs Discord.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, very exciting.
All right, so just to close out the show here, I wanted to quickly advertise some upcoming events. We here at the Space Slugs have actually put our hands up to run the main TTS Online League that you've heard us mention over the last few episodes. And that's totally free to sign up for and participate in. And it's just generally a really awesome experience and time. So this is actually going to kick off on the 4th of February at 10 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And will basically feature weekly rounds. Now, if you do miss that initial sign up, have no fear, because you're more than welcome to jump in at any point and play a few games. But you'll need a minimum of 4 wins to make it into the elimination rounds that we will also be hosting. But if you just want to jump in and have some games with local or international folks, yeah, have a good time and sign on up. The players pack is up on the Slugs Discord, and you can find all of the instructions required to participate in there. Additionally, if you're in Melbourne, head over to Warpling's Game Club on the 10th of February for a single-day showdown event hosted by Uraga. If you're in Brisbane on the 24th of February, head over to Irresistible Force for a single-day showdown event and also a Learn to Play Shatterpoint event hosted by Kildare. So that's one to really look out for if you want to dip your toe into Shatterpoint. If you're in Sydney on the 25th of February, head over to the Combat Company for the monthly Shatterpoint Showdown event hosted by Winter AU. I will be there, so you can pop in and say hello, as will Cameron. And the best way to stay up to date with all of these events is to join up to the Shatterpoint Australia Discord. So all of the links that you'll need to do that are in the episode's show notes. So thank you so much once again for listening, and thank you to all of our brand new paid patrons, Soup, Alan Jones, Death 1942, Bruno, and Duralvar. If you'd like to directly support what we're doing here at the Space Slugs, follow our link tree below and join up to our Patreon.
The ability to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the power of the Force.